guys, welcome back. Welcome to another video. Bear with me. I have been incredibly busy these past few days because this is kind of the week that we're trying to get my business sold and all that kind of stuff. And so the paperwork was heavy. The last couple days I've been away in Arkansas, and I just got back. And today I spent 4.5 hours just reading words, going back and forth on terms, going back and forth on the agreement of how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, how are we going to structure that, how are we going to structure repossession in the event of non-payment, like all sorts of. It's just, oh my God. So my brain is like completely fried. But so I'm not quite yet to the point where I can do what I actually want to do, which is put me in a proper window because I'm still using this photo booth, like in the screen recording. It's not a great system, but it's what I've got right now. So, all right. So I wanted to get to this. This video actually found me as I was driving to Arkansas, and I didn't watch the video because I was like, I know immediately I want to react to this video. But basically it is why deconstruction hurts, the ache after faith. I have to say, this is probably one of the most real things. Oh my God. Whenever I left Christianity, the thing is, you don't realize, I don't think Christians realize how, you don't know how deep a tree's roots are until you pull it up. And then you realize, oh, these roots were deep and like super little fine tendrils that just, and it's like if you are the dirt and the tree is this belief system, when you're pulling out the tree, you're like having to claw to get all of your parts back and to separate who you are from the, from the tree, from the religion that, from that indoctrinated you, right? And so it's just like this massive like crisis. It is genuinely like a personal crisis when somebody goes through this. And so that's why I have nothing but compassion for people who are, if they are in the state of trying to figure out what they believe, I'm very compassionate towards people who are that way because, yeah, it can be complicated. But if they're in the path of, at the end of the day, it is just that floating until you have finally landed. And when you finally land, you'll land somewhere. Are you completely comfortable with it? Maybe yes, maybe no, whatever. But in general, you will land. The question is, where are you going to land? Basically, deconstruction is taking the snow globe and shaking it violently, and all this stuff starts to flutter around. So then the question becomes, okay, where are we going now? Where is everything landing now, right? So let's get into this. So this is Brandon on Mindshift. I love this guy. He's a really good, really awesome. I would call him a deconstructionist. I don't know that that's a term. But that honestly should be a term, a Christian deconstructionist, right? But I would call him a deconstructionist because he, just every single thing. His videos are great. If you haven't seen his channel, please go watch his channel. His videos are just awesome. He's got really, really great videos. Anyways, so this is talking about the heartache, all the emotions involved with leaving the church, and there are so many. So let's get into this.
I will not be responding to a Christian comment, rather someone who recently left the faith and is...
Okay, so we're back. Sorry, I had a phone call come in from one of my employees who is soon to be not one of my employees. And so I just had to answer that call, but then it turned out to be a butt dial. I'm like, oh my God. All right, let's get into this.
Every single video I make to be able to help those that are doubting deconstructing or who have deconverted. And so I'm very excited to cover this with you because it is not a unique problem. Here is the comment. Brandon, as a recent deconstructionist, I've recently been struggling with missing being part of the Christian community. Even though I know logically it is false, I can't help but miss when I did believe. Have you ever experienced this in your deconstruction? How did you get past this if so? And from the username, I will assume that your name is Cassandra. So Cassandra, thank you for the comment. I can't make this go away for you. This is part of the process, not just for people that left Christianity, but for people that leave anything that is so core to who they are, who they were, what their identity was. What I can do is sympathize with you. What I can do is help normalize this for you. And what I hope to do is be able to verbalize some things here that will assist you as you continue to go through the process.
So your body is recognizing it as a loss, right? And a loss is a loss. Your body kind of recognizes this entire situation as a loss of a relationship, right? Because it was something that used to relate to so much, that used to be a part of your identity, and now that you're walking away from it, your body is actively trying to find something else to grab onto. It's looking for some sense of stability. And so that's why whenever, people tend to be going through this, I tend to tell people to get into hobbies, to do something, because your body, when you're pulling away from something, your body is actively in a state of trying to find out what it's going to latch on to, right? And so that's why, go get yourself a Lego set or go buy a sword. I mean, you see why I have so many damn stuff. Whenever I was walking away from Christianity, it was brutal for me. And it's also because it's your sense of community. And depending on how you grew up, I am the only non-Christian person, period, in my family. Everybody else is completely and utterly Christian. And so for me, it was, in a sense, walking away from my family, although it wasn't, right? I still hang out with them all the time. Just the other day, I went to go to my parents' house, and they were watching a sermon on their TV. Everybody was gathered around, and I had to waste 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So I said, all right, screw it. I'll just go watch the sermon. And that was one of the most triggering things that I've ever done, because it's like, God is omniscient. God is patient. It was on Jeremiah, and he was like, God knows you before you were born. God has your plan before you were born. God knows your... And it's all of this like, hallelujah, preach it, brother, amen, God knows me. But then when you start applying the logic to it, it's like none of this actually makes sense. Like the idea of an omniscient, omnipotent, unconditionally loving God that works under the Christian Bible does not make sense. Now, this has always been my stance. I believe in God. I just don't believe that the God of the Bible is a true representation of what he actually is. I think it's much more complicated. I think it's much more complicated and simple at the same time as to what he is. And what it is, there's no genders, personally, is what I feel. And so, all my belief is that you can't fit the entirety of everything in this little tiny book. It's too small. And so that's why that's kind of my rant. But we'll get back to this.
You have done the hard work intellectually, but that doesn't mean that emotionally everything is just fine. And that really matters, because a lot of people, I think, when they think of deconstruction or they think of deconverting or changing their mind, it can be sometimes stitched together with this concept of they're figuring out the right answer, they're winning an argument. But deconstruction is so much more than that. It is a life that you lose, and then you have to rebuild. You are in that first part, but on your way to the second. It's time to rebuild. Now, I'm talking in generalities, and I don't know your specific situation, so not everything I'm saying is going to fit perfectly for you or for anyone else watching this, but I hope from a high level here that you can get some relief. The first thing that I would encourage you to do is just change that framing. This is an opportunity. This is exciting. This is a chance for you to have autonomy and agency in your life. You get to build, you get to discover, you get to find, you get to say what's meaningful, you get to choose how you're going to orient yourself in this world. It's not something that was handed to you. It's not from some ancient book or from your parents' belief that they held. Welcome to your life. Right. It's terrifying, but it can also be so exhilarating. That's what freedom is. It's both of those things. And finding out the truth is freedom. It's freedom for...
Here's the thing. Christianity is a mental prison. It's a mental prison. It's not a physical prison. Unless for some reason you have like some sort of weird thing where you're living with a bunch of Christians and they've got like pitchforks and stuff pointed at you. But it's a mental prison. And so when you're walking away from that, you're having to completely restructure your mind, which is your belief systems, what you believe, how you express yourself, right? Let's think about how you express yourself, okay? Um, I remember that I used to be the guy where I was always really, really tough. I was always really, really, really masculine, always like macho kind of guy. Macho hombre is kind of how I like. And when I would walk, I would almost like peacock around. Like I literally looked like a freaking rooster. One of my friends actually used to make the remark that you look like a rooster when you walk around because you always just walk around with that peacocking attitude, um, and uh, and so whenever I started, kind of like rearranging my beliefs and rearranging my entire life, I was like, I don't actually want to walk around like a peacock. I actually don't want to do that. I don't know why I did that. I don't know, but it was just kind of like this, some sort of, now I'm not saying that's a Christian thing, right? Because obviously everybody's going to be like, oh, well, you shouldn't have had pride, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, okay, guys. Whenever I hear Christians say that you shouldn't be prideful, I'm like, you guys do not see yourselves. And so, um, I remember thinking, you know what? I just want to be a nice person. Like I just want to be kind of the fun person who walks into the gas station and says hello, big summer blowout, like that kind of thing, instead of the whole, hey, what's up, man? Give me that. Oh, all right, thanks. You know, like I wanted to walk up, and if I liked a person's tattoos, I wanted to say, oh, I really like your tattoos. You got cool tattoos. Or if I liked a girl's eyes, I wanted to say, oh, I really like your eyes. You have beautiful eyes. But I kept stopping myself. And so this is not this I wouldn't associate to Christianity. I would just associate this to the programming that you're operating under the guides of Christianity, right? Because once, it's kind of like I was saying, when you pull out that tree and you've got all those roots that are hanging on to so much of the dirt, which the dirt is who you are, right? The tree is the parasitic, well, trees aren't parasites. They can be. But the tree, for the most part, is just, this belief system, right? So as you're pulling up this belief system out of the ground, you have to realize that so much of you is still locked into that belief system. And so now you got to claw your way to get back all of the positive aspects of you that you really like, and leave all the parts that you don't like. And then when you think you've done that, then you look at the ground and you find more roots, right? It's a complicated process. And this is why, when a person is very, very much enveloped in Christianity and they point to me and they say, you've got this wrong, I don't see it that way, simply because I've been there, I've looked at it, I've recognized it as not my belief system, not my truth, but something that is separate from me. And so in that way, I've plucked it out, set it aside, let this go back wherever it wants to go back, and I'm going to reclaim who I am. And in that process, like he is saying, Brandon's saying, it is exhilarating. It's so freeing. You feel so amazing, like you've got your life back, One of the biggest things that I'd mentioned in the previous video was the whole idea of like tithing. And everything that you create belongs to God. All of your ideas belong to God. Everything that you do belongs to God. Every breath that you take belongs to God. Oh my fucking God. Not everything belongs to God, right? It's not, it's like if a person, in the church that I grew up in, everything belonged to God. And so we weren't allowed to applaud. There was no clapping. There was no cheering. When a person would go up and they would sing and they would play their piano, they would perform, whatever it was. When a person would go up on stage and do that, we weren't allowed to clap. We weren't allowed to give any applause at all, because the person, all of the glory associated with that performance, 0% of that glory belonged to the person who performed it. And all of that glory belonged to God. Right? So you went up there in complete devotion. They paint this in this like weird, trippy, psychedelic way of devotion and beauty. But you went up there and you worked for weeks and weeks and weeks, and you go and you perform this thing, and you get zero appreciation for what you did, for the work that you put in. All of the appreciation goes to this being in the sky that loves to kill people whenever he's bored. Like, and so they don't see it that way, right? Because you are still enmeshed in it, because all of your dirt is still very much involved with the tree roots, and you can't separate the tree roots from the dirt because you're not there yet. So I get it, and I'm compassionate towards the cause. But yeah, when you start walking away, it is both. It's shaking, and in that shaking, there is massive potential to restructure your life in the way that you want to restructure your life, but it's shaking, right? So, yeah.
For your mind in a world that would otherwise want you to be enslaved. Be proud of yourself, first and foremost. Do you know how hard it is to change your mind? Do you know how hard it is to be open to new information? Do you know how hard it is to go against the grain? Well, actually, yes, you do. But maybe you haven't recognized all the work you've already done to get to this point. So again, I say to you, be proud and be excited. By the way, just a quick pause for anyone that is looking to this video for actual help and guidance because you are in the same spot as Cassandra. I have an entire playlist that has grouped together some of these matters. So I'd encourage you to take a look through that. Here's a few quick thoughts I prepared for this. The first thing that I want to say to you is that you are not confused. You are not weak. You are not fully deconverted, because many people do feel that way. They consider if maybe they were wrong. They start to question if this is worth it, or if maybe they're still kind of a Christian, or they still kind of believe. Those leftover fears and or new realizations about the emotional hardship that is now in your life can often result in that kind of thinking and even that kind of shame. And maybe you already know that. Maybe you are truly just saying, yeah, no, hey, I know it's false. Here I am, but man, it sucks. Yeah, sometimes it does. But missing community is not the same thing as Christ being true. Missing community doesn't mean that Christians were right. So I'm saying that because I want you to know that you didn't lose truth. You gained truth at a cost, and that cost is a lack of structure, a missing identity for a time being.
And it is for a time being, right? Because ultimately, I would say it depends on how you grew up. I grew up as a child in church, and so for me, my friends, all that kind of stuff, they were there since I was a kid. I'm not the one who made the decision to pull into that driveway and go say hi to a bunch of people. I was the one who got dragged in there. And then as a consequence of going there constantly, I eventually said hi to some people, because I tend to be more introverted than anything. And so one thing that I think is important is that, kind of like I said, as you disconnect from Christianity, I would encourage you to latch on to something else that fills you, right? And so instead of maybe your everyday Sunday you're going to a church, maybe your everyday Sunday is going to a cooking class or going to a pottery class. Pay your tithe to them, to a local business who's actually going to benefit people versus a 501c3 nonprofit organization that only serves its members, But yeah, that's why I would highly recommend that if you are kind of doing that initial disconnection, that you find connection elsewhere, because that is one of the hardest things with Christianity, with walking away from Christianity, is that your body's registering a loss because you're disconnecting from a bunch of people. Now, here's the thing. You may see it, you may view it that you're disconnecting from a bunch of people who love you, right? They do. But it's blind leading the blind inside of that place, right? And so that's the thing. It's they love you, but they want you to be there to believe what they believe, to do what they do. I don't want to like paint this sort of picture that I've got buku bucks or anything like that. But whenever I started making money as an entrepreneur, I realized that a lot of my poor friends couldn't handle the fact that I had money now. And I didn't even have a lot of it, I had an excess of $2,000. I mean, that's nothing, right? Now, for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. I get it. I've also been in a situation where I've woke up with my bank account saying that I owe the bank $5,000, and I would have to work the entire week just to increase the account balance from negative 5,000 to negative 3,000. I get it, right? But at the same time, um, whenever I was making that little bit of money, I would have friends who immediately would shift into, now you're paying for everything for me, right? Now you're buying me all my dinners. Now when I'm late on my phone bill, you're going to be the one who bails me out. Now when I'm late on my car payment, you're going to be the one who bails me out. Now when I have a whatever and I need money, you're going to be the one who bails me out. And so, you know, you love them, they love you, but they have this perception that just doesn't work with your highest good, with your best feeling of yourself, right? With your most the biggest expression of who you are is kind of muffled by Christianity. And so that's the thing. It's like, imagine if you are gay, right? If you are a person who grew up as a homosexual, and you grew up in a church like mine that was strictly prohibited and you were going to hell. My pastor would literally kick people out of the church because they showed up as homosexual, right? And so they could be in the pews, but they would have to sit far away from each other, and they wouldn't be able to touch or hold hands or do anything homosexual during the service. It was really crazy. But that's the thing. Imagine you grew up there, right? One of my friends grew up there. Imagine you grew up there, okay? They love you. They care about you. But the strings that are attached to those relationships are the anchors that hold you back down from living the life that you want to live, are the literal chains and anchors that are keeping you where you're at, that are keeping you from the joy that you want to experience, that are keeping you from the self-expression that you want to experience, that are keeping you from maybe the dollar amount that you want to make. I know that was certainly the case for me, because anytime I had an excess of, a few $1,000s, I felt like I had to give the church something, and so yeah, I what you lose in community, you gain in freedom, 100%. But at the same time, I would recommend you take that opportunity to still find community, but try to find it in a place that actually is going to benefit you, right? Try to find it in a gym. Try to find it in a Zumba class, in a yoga class, in a art class, whatever. Get out there and find that community, because what you'll notice is that's what your body is mainly missing. It's not really missing all the toxic crap. It's missing the community and the connection, because at the end of the day, humans, we're social beings. Even though I am still much more of an introvert than I am an extrovert, I occasionally will climb out of my hole so that I can interact with my 4 favorite people in the world, and then I'll go climb back into my hole. And then I won't see them for a week, right? And so that's basically what you want to do is, in the process of kind of unlatching that and cleaning off yourself from Christianity, you do want to find something healthier that is expressive of what your desires are and move toward that.
Belonging, ritual, certainty, and really importantly, shared meaning. You might call that community, but man, I think there's something even deeper there. I miss that. You know what I miss? Just to be vulnerable with you, I thought about this the other day. I miss getting to pray for people. I miss praying with others. I see the harm in it now, let alone the fact that it did nothing in terms of what I was praying for. But personally, the sense of connection, of shared meaning, hoping together, relying on something more.
It's being able to show a person love and affection, and when you in the way of a prayer, in the way of compassion, in the way of hugging a person, right? Just being there for a person, and religion gives people meaning, believe it or not. So many people, if they don't have their religion, they genuinely feel that their life is utterly pointless, right? Now, some atheists would say that, life is utterly pointless. Other atheists would say that, well, you should want to do things to you should want to contribute to society. You should want to help society. I grew up in a way that I hated society and I hated everybody around me. And so the idea that, contributing to society was going to be the higher meaning in my life was like, no, because, I don't even like half these people out here. That's when I was living inside Houston. Houston's a dense place. Oh my God. But yeah, after I deconstructed, I didn't take the atheist route because for me, I knew that God existed. And so I took my own route of my own spirituality to try to find what was right for me. And I found it very, very, very far away from Christianity. But, it what I've re-implemented back into my life is that connection because your body is going to crave the connection. We're all social animals. We're all social beings. Believe it or not, occasionally, just occasionally, even the hardest of person just wants a hug every now and then, right? Trust me how I know. I lived in Alaska for, the entire time, I would literally fly from Alaska just down to Texas just for hugs because, I don't have any family up there, no friends up there, didn't know anybody up there. And I'm a big person where, I like hugs and all that kind of stuff. And so whenever I moved up there, the entire time that I was up there, I got zero affection from anybody. And it was honestly one of the harder things I've ever done.
More than just yourself? That's powerful. Now, sometimes I have to give this caveat. Christians who watch will hear that and they will say, see, no, that's what I just said. Christianity doesn't just become true because sometimes in some very specific situations, it's kind of useful despite its harm. So just to get that right. And by the way, there's more than just that. That's just one that I've recently thought about, which is like, man, the intimacy I used to have with my family or my friends when I really believed that when we bowed our heads and held our hands and spoke to the creator of the universe, something was happening. That was something. And there's many other somethings too. So part of your question was if I have dealt with this. And yes, this wasn't just an easy thing for me. This wasn't just no skin off my back.
And so that's where me and Mind Shift would part ways on that specific topic. Like I said, I'm not an atheist. I do believe that God exists, and I do still believe in all of the and like I said, I've mentioned a couple of times, I've had a bunch of things that have happened in my life that just can't be explained by science. And there are atheists that are going to pound on the door that say, well, if it can't be explained by science, then it didn't happen. My response to them is that you're no better than the gaslighting Christian that you're trying to be better than, because Christianity does the exact same thing to you. Whenever you experience these things, people will just gaslight you into saying that, no, you're just clearly wrong. And you were on drugs or something like that. Doesn't matter that, I don't do drugs. I've never done drugs. Everybody will rush to frame you as the one who's crazy. So, and I know that, and it doesn't bother me. But at the end of the day, I also know that just because a person tries to invalidate one of my, just because a person tries to invalidate my belief doesn't mean that it's a wrong belief. It just is what it is, right? It kind of starts the whole.
Still affects.
Sorry, not going to do that to Brandon. Leave him on a bad picture. I'm not going to do that whole thing where it's like, okay, well, just because this one person told me that I was crazy, now I'm going to believe it. No, I recognize that, if a person has an experience in life, that is their experience, right? It's like for me to tell an airline pilot who's had an airplane accident that airplane accidents don't exist just because I haven't ever seen one and I've never experienced one. So because I've never seen one, I've never experienced one, I can gaslight the airline pilot into telling them that no, airline crashes, plane crashes don't exist. And the planet is flat, just random little gaslighting things, right? Let's not get into the whole flat earther thing, but that tends to be their rebuttal to fact. These are these factual things, and their rebuttal is the earth is flat. And it's like, okay, man, and that's where the argument ends. If you're smart, that's where the argument ends, because then you recognize you're pouring energy into a vessel that doesn't want it, So
me. Every single person in my life is a Christian, and having this channel didn't make any of that any easier. I'm with you. Those things that I listed, they are powerful psychological and social forces, and religion is very good at supplying them. If it wasn't, it wouldn't still be here. And again, I'm not speaking just to Cassandra here, but a pattern that I have noticed is that when people try to hold these two things, I know this isn't true, but I miss X, in this case, community. That's not the same thing as cognitive dissonance. That's grief. And grief doesn't really respond to arguments. No intellectual victory or understanding of correct history can really mitigate that. And by the way, I don't say this to discourage you or to make you more afraid, and I don't know exactly where you are in your process or how long it's been or how long you were a believer or anything like that. But let me just say that sometimes this comes in waves. So even if you start feeling better and it happens again, it doesn't mean it wasn't really better. It doesn't mean you're not making progress. It doesn't mean that the rebuilding isn't happening. It's just not always linear. And some of my thoughts are just kind of coming in sporadic, and so I'm sorry if it's not more structured, but I just want to give you as much help as I can in this quick reply. I gave you the prayer example, but let me go a bit further just to really empathize so you can really know you're not alone. Anyone who is listening, even I, the atheist YouTuber who knows 100% how false and harmful this religion is, still have these moments, little bits of sorrow. This is in addition to just the daily difficulty of being in a Christian community in general, as the black sheep of it all. But having someone tell you exactly who you are and exactly what your purpose is kind of a nice thing sometimes. And sometimes I miss that. It is hard.
so that's kind of my thing. That's where I separate from the atheist from this. I'm gonna share a story. I'm gonna share a personal story at the chance of sounding crazy. That's what I don't care what you guys think. This is my story. This is how my life happened. Um, and uh, and this is one of the reasons why I always hesitate to tout that it is very 100% factually evident that God does not exist. When you look at, if you ever get into microscopy, number one, obviously that's an incredible world out there, and sure, you'll have your mind absolutely blown. Especially when you start seeing yourself under the microscope, it's equally just as engaging. But um, you know, there's been a ton of scenarios, but there was one time where um, we were driving. It was my ex-wife, and we were celebrating our third or fourth anniversary. I don't remember. I want to say it was our third anniversary, and we were driving to San Antonio, and we were driving to San Antonio, and on our way, it was dusk, something like that, kind of low light conditions, but not. Okay, it's the winter time in Texas. What time is it? 5 o'clock. I would say it was about 5 o'clock, maybe 5:45, 6 p.m. Right, to give you an idea of what the conditions were like. Right, so the sun is going down, and it has gone down, but it's still very much light outside. Right, it's like the sun just went down, and it's still so very bright that you can see everything. So while my ex-wife and we were driving down this highway. Now, mind you, I am a person who is constantly alone out in the wilderness. I am a stargazer. I will go way out into the wild, completely alone, completely at night, completely in the dark, just to go stare at stars. That is who I am, right? And so, because of that, and because I've done it so often, I've seen a lot of things that do not obey the laws of physics in the skies at night. It's just the reality of the situation, right? And so, at least not the 3D physical Earth, right? But whenever we were driving, my ex-wife's family, they would always call me they wouldn't call me crazy on the thing because, they everybody has their fun little spooky ghost stories and stuff like that. But my ex-wife just never believed any of my I would always tell her, yeah, there's life is significantly more complicated than what meets the eye. And she'd, always kind of just pass, whatever, okay, dude, crazy, right? She would say, okay, whatever. We were driving down, And we were driving down the highway. It was dusk. We were passing this field that had a large tree backdrop. So it was a big field of corn or something. It was freshly mowed down. And then there's this big, massive tree line of pine trees all the way back behind. So you could very obviously see kind of a backdrop, right? And about 50 yards away from the roadway, when we were just there on the road, it was just us driving on the road. Out of nowhere, my ex-wife, she's just kind of looking casually out the window, and I'm just kind of driving. Out of nowhere, this big, massive green orb appears of light. See, I've already lost so many of you guys. Guess what? I don't care, because this is what happened. So this big, massive green orb of light just appears out of nowhere, hovers above the ground, maybe 4 feet off the ground, something like that, and it's about the size of a beach ball. And it hovers there, matching the speed of our car while we're driving on our way to San Antonio as we're passing by this field. And we're the only people on the roadway. And this orb of light, this big green orb of light, hovers beside our car, matching our speed for about 3 to 4 seconds. I don't know how long it was. It was about 3 to 4 seconds, something like that. Let me think. Okay, so maybe about 5 to 6 seconds, because I'm trying to remember the moment. I want to say it was maybe 5 to 6 seconds. It was a while, right? If I started something right now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? That's a significant amount of time, right? So it was about 5 seconds that this thing was just matching our speed, hovering about 50 yards away from the car, roughly 50 yards. Maybe it may have been a little bit closer. And then after a 5 second period, around 5 seconds, about 5 seconds. After about 5 seconds, this thing just shoots off across the field, but it doesn't go anywhere. It actually collapses into nothing. So there's this big, massive green ball of light that pops up out of nowhere, matches our speed, and then shoots off into the distance, and we can see the tree line. So it has, this big green light has a big black backdrop, right? It shoots off into the distance, and it doesn't go through the trees. It doesn't go up into the sky. It collapses into disappearing nothing, right? And so that's why, for me, it is clear that the 3D world as we know it is not all that's out there. It is, for me, it is a 100% factual reality of my life. Now, you probably have not experienced that. If you have, I'd love to know. Please leave it in the comments. You most likely have never experienced that. And so you would sit there and you'd say, how in the world have you, what is your problem? You've lost your mind, you've lost your rocker, you're clearly smoking something. I assure you, I was a saint at that point in my life. I was going to church, we were doing the Pentecostal thing, we were completely sober, right? But that's my point, is that people rush to invalidate your life experiences. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with belief systems and religions in general, especially with atheists and especially with Christians, is that they rush to invalidate these things that have happened, right? And so imagine if you're a pilot and you've crashed your plane and you say, I've been in a plane crash. Think about it. How many people do you know that have been in a plane crash? I would say the vast majority of people who are going to watch this don't know anybody who's been in a plane crash, in a serious plane crash, right? So if you walked up to a person at a bar and they say, I've been involved in a plane crash, that doesn't mean that you should immediately say, you're absolutely stupid, you're absolutely crazy. I have never met a person who's ever been in a plane crash, thus your experience of being in that situation is completely invalid. That's where I say, this is where, the idea of only taking on logic completely falls apart, because there are some things that we just don't understand. And there are things that we can't necessarily replicate inside of a laboratory in perfect conditions. And so there's so many people, well, if you can't replicate it, then it doesn't exist. Then half of the plant research wouldn't make any sense, because there are so much research revolving plants that cannot be replicated. It is, there is this rounding error of 4 to 5 experiments of, you do this and not every single time the experiment works. But okay, I'm going to stop. I have a tendency to ramble. Let's go over here.
Hard work to construct identity, meaning, morality, and purpose on your own. Doesn't mean it's not worthwhile, doesn't mean it's not what's real. It's harder, and sometimes harder sucks. I've missed being part of the group, the people that knew the lingo, having the same symbolic language. We are built to fit in, to want to fit in. And so when all of a sudden that's gone, that's hard. I don't get a lot of opportunities to sing together. Almost none, actually, anymore. I need to start going to more concerts. There's something very, very psychologically useful and beneficial about that. This channel has helped me feel like I'm a part of something bigger than myself, but that is another need or desire that I think a lot of us have.
Yeah, I used to be a choir kid. I used to sing opera, and I used to play euphonium in the church. I have tubas now because, one of the biggest things in my life is that my dad would never buy me a tuba no matter how much I wanted it. And so now that I have tubas, I'm like, I do kind of miss being in a church orchestra because I really want to play my instrument. But, I may not be good enough for a professional orchestra, but I still want to play my instrument in an orchestra, So there's a lot of these social benefits involved with churches. And these fun, connecting, they're great places to meet people. They're great places to find a spouse. They're great places to hang out and to have camaraderie and all this kind of stuff. And that's what a lot of people end up missing. And the answer to that is to simply find it outside of Christianity, right? Whenever I was in Anchorage, I joined a band in Anchorage. It wasn't a Christian band. It wasn't a church band. Sure, whenever we practiced at a church, but it wasn't a church affiliated band. We were just borrowing their facilities. And so yeah, it's you find the things that you enjoy doing. Now instead of going and singing opera at a pulpit, I'll go sing karaoke at a bar. I get the same reaction, and they applaud me. So it's even more validating for me. It feels so much better because whenever I'm done, people actually clap, so
And by the way, it took a long time to build this. And I'm not saying you have to have a YouTube channel, but I'm saying that it might take time to regain some of these things or effort or hardships to get there. And that's okay. But man, I get it. Even the idea that there was someone watching over things. I am I don't want to say anxious person, but I'm a very safety conscious person, and I'm highly and often concerned about the well-being of my children. And when they were still young, and I still believed, when I would get into these states and I would worry about their future, or I would worry about something happening to them, when I could give that to God, when I could just say a prayer and trust in Him, that sense of relief, man, I miss that. Now I've got to deal with reality. Now I've got to take full responsibility for every single thing in my life, whether it is my children and their well-being, whether it is my friends, whether it is my wife, whether it is my job, whether it is my future, being able to retire, finances, all of it. You can't just give it up to God.
And so once again, that's where him and I would part ways. And this is why I kind of started this channel, is because, in the deconstructing thing, there is going to be this strong pull to, this is completely on my own, but it's not. I can tout it till I'm blue in the face, and I already know there's going to be people who keep shouting, it's coincidence, it's coincidence, it's coincidence. Like, okay, bud. But I remember whenever I initially started walking away from Christianity, I have a business model that I've had for 10 years, 12 years, something like that. That is an absolute cash cow for me. And it just works. It's a business that works. I sign up today, I make money today. Like, it's just a good business model kind of thing. Um, but it requires that I have about $6,000 up front, right? Because whenever I start it, I typically have to go about 3 months or 2 months without making any money at all and just investing. And so I need about $7,000 to cover life, the life expenses plus parts and things like that. And so, and so, uh, so yeah, I sat down one day and I told God, I was like, look, if you want so badly for me to walk away from Christianity and you want so badly for me to focus on the spirituality and figure out what I believe, if you want that so badly, you need to give me money because I don't have any money. I need 7 grand. And at the time, I only think I may have had like $1,000 or maybe $2,000, right? And I essentially told God, look, I don't got the cash, right? And I let it go. I said, you want me to do this? Talking to the sky, or technically speaking, I was talking to the ceiling in my bedroom. I said, you want me to do this? I need money. I need cash. And I let it go. I went out 2 days later. I was walking. I was at my job, and I was working inside of a client's home. And at this job, the client and I started talking, and I told her that I used to have a business, and that I was married, lived in Texas, and then we divorced over the whole COVID thing. She was an ICU nurse, That's a weird way of saying it. She was an ICU nurse. I was on an ambulance. I was an EMT, and so with both of us just dealing with all the stresses of the pandemic, it basically just ripped us apart, and we went our separate ways. And she had a similar story. She was Catholic. She was raised Catholic, and she was married. And her husband ended up leaving her over some stuff. They ended up splitting and all this kind of stuff. So, anyways, I just tell her, I'm like, okay, well, I'm done here. I'm going to go on my day. And she stops me and she's like, let me just say something to you really quick. And I'm like, okay, what's up? She says, I don't know why I feel this way, but I just get this strong feeling. If you ever need any money, do you need any money right now? And I'm just like, I mean, not really. I've got what I need to live. She's just like, I don't know why I feel this, but I just, I want to give you a check for $10,000. And I was like, what the fuck, it completely, because that is not the conversation that you have with a person as you're walking out of their home, them offering you a check for 10 grand. And I'm not going to show the check. I keep the check with me all the time. I don't show the check because it's got her information on it. It's got her check number on it. But I use that as my little evidence, right? And so I initially said, no, I'm not going to take it. And so, okay, I leave. I told her that I'd like to take down her information in case I change my mind, but in the moment, I'm not going to take it. She says, okay. So I went back and then I told God again, great, you've got money, because I really didn't want to start my own business. Running your own business is so much work. It's hard. It's complicated. You get burnt out. You deal with shit. And sometimes you get sued. It's like, it is just so complicated and it's stressful. And so I really didn't want to do it, is what it came down to. But I told God, I was like, okay, thanks for the money, but guess what? I don't have an office. I don't have a support system. I don't have anything else. And so then a few days later, I was working in another client's home. This client happened to be a pretty, a rich person. No, I'm not there for any of that. I'm there to fix his stuff and leave. And while we're talking, we're conversating and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of the same thing as I'm basically wrapping up everything and I'm turning to leave. I say, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to go. And he goes, I don't know why I feel this way about you, but I just want to let you know that if you need an office space, I have a 2-story office space with an empty office. If you need an office space, you are free to use that office space. And I have a lawyer on staff and I have a CPA on staff. And if you ever need anybody, all of my resources are open to you. You can use them whenever you want, right? Coincidence number 2. So then I go and I call back the lady and I tell her, I will accept your $10,000. I would really appreciate it. From there, changes to $10,000 to $6,000. Okay, that's fine. So I get this check for $6,000 and I'm able to start my company with a $6,000 of free money, right? Um, and so basically that ended up turning out because I told her, I was like, look, I'll pay you back. I know I don't need this money. I can pay you back. And so I kind of felt bad about just taking the whole thing. So we ended up doing I told her, you give me 6,000, give me 6 months, I'll give you 6,000 back. Like, that's how confident I was. I did not need a lot of time to kind of churn the money. And, uh, and, uh, and she ended up turning it into, you know, I'll give you 6,000 and you give me back 5,000, like a negative interest loan. And I was just like, what? And so so I took that $1,000 and I did, a bunch of stuff, helped a lot of people. I love a lot of people, helped a lot of people, bought a shit ton of pizzas for a shit ton of homeless people, bought a shit ton of Amazon crackers for a shit ton of homeless people. I would run around the homeless camps, passing out pizza boxes with I love you messages on the pizza boxes so that they could feel like they were appreciated and loved. And yeah. And so that's why, those are only two separate events. No, 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 no. It's event after 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 event. This is why you cannot convince me that there is some external force. This is why I refuse to accept it. I'm driving a free car right now that I told God, it's not that I can't afford a car. It's not that I couldn't afford to buy a car. I just didn't want to buy a car. God, please give me a free car. Oh, thumbs up. Sorry, didn't mean to do that. God, please give me a free car. I don't want to pay any money for it. I just want another vehicle because I don't want to put the mileage on the vehicle I'm making payments on. And a week later, a family member that I've never spoken to contacts me out of nowhere and says, hey, I'm in Florida. Do you need a car? Right? I go and I pick up and now I drive a free car, right? I tell God that I want to live on a 45-acre ranch and I want to have 2 lakes and I want to be able to have all the animals I want and I want a nice house, just a really nice house, a nicer place than I've ever lived in before. And then on top of that, I don't want to pay rent. I just want to help out around the property. When things break down, I want to fix them. When things, when they need the grass mowed, I just want to help around because I enjoyed that portion of life. When you're a kid and all you do is help out around the house and your rent and expenses are covered, right? And I thought that was the limit to what I was going to be able to receive. No. I mean, it took a bit. 2 months, something like that. The whole story is significantly longer, but basically where I live now is a 900 square foot, nice hardwood floors with marble countertops, marble bathrooms, marble windowsills, 50 acres of land, 2 lakes and a creek. I get to have my sheep outside, and I don't pay a dime. I don't pay a dime. I don't pay a dime in rent. I don't pay a dime in electric. And it happens, and it happens, and it happens, and it happens. And so that's why for me, yes, there is a lot of responsibility that you have to take in your life, right? No doubt about it. But there is also this external force that if you allow it to help you, it wants to help you make your life amazing. It wants to help you make your life better. It wants to help you get out of poverty, get out of a poor mindset, to become the most best version of yourself. It wants to do that for you, which is the reason why you're never going to convince me. I type all the way you want in the comments. If you're atheist, you're going to type away that I'm crazy as hell. That's fine. It doesn't bother me. If you're Christian, you're going to type that it's Satan. Okay, it doesn't bother me, right? I know the direction that I'd gone in. I know the direction that I moved in. And I know that this thing, has my back as long as I'm moving in a direction that feels best to me. And that's the thing, is I dictate which direction I move now. but not in an egotistical way, in a way that I love humanity so much, right? And so I just, that's why I tend to clash just a touch with these atheistic channels, is because they go from, and in general, I mean, even if you are trying to convert a person from Christianity to atheism, you need a middle step. Like, that's a hard jump to go from your entire existence is devoted to this imaginary being to now, you are completely on this planet and this is the only life that you're going to live, and that is it, right? Reincarnation is studied all over the place, not here in the United States, because the general consensus is that it's false. There's been scientists here in the United States who have studied reincarnation, but it is a predominantly studied thing in the East, in the Eastern countries, and they have thousands and thousands of cases of reincarnation and factual evidence. We reject it here in the West because we have to do our whole logic thing, and that's cool. But when you fathom reincarnation, then the idea that, and I don't mean this in a mean way, I don't mean this in like a Brandon's dumb way, not at all. I love Brandon to death. This guy is brilliant. There's, but, when you understand that your life, that this is not where you end, right? That when you die, you do continue on. What that looks like, I don't know. We all have ideas of what it may look like, right? There's people with near-death experiences that have an idea of what it may look like, but there's solid evidence to conclude that something does happen after we die, and that is not where we end, right? If you look at the Monroe Institute, they do a lot of research into consciousness and all that kind of stuff. And for those who don't know, the Monroe Institute, it's basically an agency that was started by Robert Monroe. The CIA used them for psychic spying during the Cold War. They found a lot of success with it. They took the Project Dark. And so as far as we're concerned, the project no longer exists, but that's how half the stuff in the United States is these things no longer exist, but yet they're soaking up millions of dollars or billions of dollars, right? Okay, but yeah, so that's kind of my rant on that. Just because you're walking away from Christianity doesn't mean that God exists. All it means is that it's not here. That's it. That's all it means. It doesn't mean that God doesn't exist. It doesn't mean that there isn't some support system to help, us as we are navigating this experience. All it means is that it's not here. Look again. Try again, right? And, at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, right? Because if your system doesn't hurt anybody, and that's the problem with Christianity, is it hurts so many people. If your belief system doesn't hurt anybody, then there's no problem with, clenching on your belief system, right? Like, I know that Brandon's, because I've seen so much of his channel, I know that Brandon basically has the stance of, if you want to be a Christian, but don't be the flavor of Christian that, has all the negative attributes. Don't be the flavor of Christianity that says that everything in the Bible is absolutely factual. Don't be the flavor of Christian that, is going to judge a homeless person for being on the street, is going to create a sinner and an other. Be the part of Christianity where everybody is loved, where everybody is, supported. And so yeah, and I'm kind of the same way where, if you want to be one of those loftier versions of Christianity, like go to a mega church or something like that, or like one of these big Joel Osteen churches where it's basically you just go over there and they give you a bunch of positive affirmations and then you walk out. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Where it becomes a problem is whenever they just start saying, okay, now we're not going to help these people because they're gay, or now we're not going to do this because, they don't have a belief system that matches ours, or now we're going to go into this country and invade them because they're not Christian, right? And so, and so that's where him and I, Brandon and I, kind of rejoined forces again, is at the point of, accept the religion that you are in, see the dark problems with it, see all the issues with it, and accept that those are a part of it, and continue to be in the religion, but be in a better version of that, if that's what you want to do. Ideally, you just completely just walk away from it, because you see all the writing on the wall, and you say, this isn't for me. But okay, I'm gonna stop. Sorry guys, I'm turning this 20-minute video into a long video.
Responsibility is absolutely a burden, and it's one that
Totally random. One thing I ought to remark is that whenever this big, massive green orb of light kind of shot off into the distance, I stayed quiet. My ex-wife is the one who turned to me with the look of death on her face. I swear to God, she looked like she'd seen a ghost. Because I've experienced this stuff before, and so, I just hush hush, it's not a big deal. I was always told that I was a crazy person, and so that's why I didn't necessarily bring anything up whenever it happened. But my ex-wife's look of fucking terror, like she had just seen a demon, right? Like, what was that? And then I was just like, what was what?
was placed upon another's shoulders. Once that person is found out to not be there and not actually be helping or handling anything, that sense of aloneness, yikes. By the way, I'm not trying to scare any of you out of any of this. I'm just being honest with you. I'm still here. I'm still not a believer, because at the end of the day, truth matters more. Reality matters more. Being honest with myself mattered more. Not contributing to the harm, not condoning a religion that is false and harmful mattered more. Even the simplicity of having answers, even bad ones, was so nice. In Christianity, there is an answer for everything. When you open the door to the real world, the abstract can be overwhelming. So I've also had to be careful and reframe things. Reframing is so powerful. I don't miss Christianity. What did you say specifically? I can't help but miss when I did believe. Yes, you framed it better than I did for a long time to myself. I didn't miss Christianity. I missed what Christianity did for me. I don't think you missed believing. Maybe to some degree. You just missed what life was like when you did believe. I think that distinction matters. So I hope that didn't make things worse, but I thought we should start with just me letting you know I'm with you. I also want to take just a second to talk about why logic doesn't just fix this. I preach a lot about logic and rationality, following truth wherever it leads. And I stand behind all of it 100%. But for the emotional issues, it doesn't help. Not too much. And I think it's a mistake that a lot of people deconstructing make, thinking that way, thinking that it will help, thinking if I just remind myself that it's false, this will go away. No, it's like trying to logic yourself out of homesickness. As a kid, I often got quite homesick, and I still had a rather logical brain despite the indoctrination going on. And I do remember trying to tell myself, it's fine, you'll be home tomorrow. It means a lot that you're at this kid's birthday party. Just stay. And it helped me make a better decision, but it didn't make me feel better. That's the distinction there. But it's important to understand this, because you do want to still use logic to make sure that you're thinking as best as you can.
Because at the end of the day, your body's experiencing a loss. I am going to increase it slightly here, 1.25. At the end of the day, your body's still experiencing a loss. You had a genuine loss. And it's a loss of connection, and so it's your body registers it basically the same as the loss of a romance, right? You're no longer connecting with people, you're no longer doing the same things, there's not as much fun, like your body's registering a loss. And so yes, the logical things will not do that, because it's your body, it's your natural animal instinct that is perceiving that it is now separated from the herd, right? And so the way you fix that is by finding another herd, joining another herd, and you go there and you connect with them. And every single positive element of Christianity that you get from a church can be found outside of a church. You do not need to go to a church to go sing in a quartet, to go, sing karaoke, to go be in an orchestra, to go do whatever. Anything that you want, or just meaningful connection, or to have fun cookouts, or to go out camping with people. All of these things exist, or to go on a retreat, right? I used to go on those Christian retreats, and I really loved them. There are adult retreats. You can go on a retreat as an adult, just stiff the bill, or not stiff the bill, stick up the payment for the bill, and then just go on a retreat and go meet other adults. Go traveling and stay at hostels. That's a great way of meeting a lot of new people.
And committing to the decisions you've made best that you can. But it took me a while to learn this, that belief systems in general, they don't live just intellectually. So an intellectual shift doesn't change that. You have to change other things. So I want to explain to you what I have learned about where these belief systems also reside, like in our habits, in our nervous system regulation, in our social reinforcement, in our identity formation, in our meaning making, and our attachments. That's a whole lot of other things that need attention from you, right, other than just your logical, rational intellectualism. See, a lot of people think that Christianity just taught us what to think, and it definitely did, but it also taught us what to feel, and it trained you how to feel safe. I mean, good Lord, every single week for your entire life, at least once, you probably went to church and got reinforcement that you were on the right track. The following.
And on the feeling of safety, I never felt extremely safe in Christianity, not as a child, because I was constantly praying that damn prayer, scared that I was going to go to hell, or that I didn't just do it right, or that I didn't pray it right, or that I didn't believe it right. And so I'm sitting there reciting the, God forgive me, Lord Jesus. I know that you died on the cross for my sins. You forgive me and accept my soul into heaven. Whatever. I can't tell you how many times I prayed that prayer, because I would always just get scared. Didn't matter how much I read the Bible. Didn't matter how much I did anything. I would occasionally just get scared, right? And that I would go through this whole, God, please forgive me. God, please forgive me. I'm such a sinner. Please, God, forgive me. Because these fears would just come up, and that's how I would find myself. Okay, I think I've said, God, forgive me. Please forgive me. Jesus Christ, you're the Son of God. You died on the cross for my sins. I think I've said that enough times now where I should be safe. Okay, now I can relax again, right? And so I also know, and I've met people who were the exact same way, that prayed that damn prayer 25,000 times. And so it gives you a sense of safety. But even those with a perceived sense of safety, I hear my mom even uttering every now and then, Lord Jesus, forgive me for my sins. I know that you died on the cross for me, all this kind of stuff. And she's just reaffirming it because she's feeling she wants that sense of safety, right? And so the question is, why isn't she getting a complete sense of safety inside of her religion? Why is she still praying that stupid prayer, right?
Jesus was a good thing, that it was going to make your life better. Yeah, maybe you got sermons about how you're going to struggle and be an enemy of the world and things like this, but just to what? To win more later. The promise of Christianity, I don't care how you hear it in all the different versions, whether it's fire and brimstone or prosperity gospel, is that it is better to be a Christian than to not be. That has been drilled into you in 1,000 different ways. I'll do an entire episode on that because I don't think people understand how many different levels are coming at you in that regard. But I say all of that just so that you know that when you leave, yeah, your mind is free, but your poor nervous system just hasn't had time to catch up. So it's okay. The best thing you can do is know that and be patient with yourself. That's what I meant about still utilizing logic to make the right decisions. And the right decision is patience. It's to wait. It's to know that others have felt like you have, that they too have gone through the process, and that it indeed has gotten better. And by the way, yes, things have gotten much, much better for me. But if you've watched this channel at all, you know that I've had to work for that. Another thing that I want to make sure I communicate, something I've recently been thinking about a lot and was going to do an entire episode on, is that missing your belief or your religion or your church or your community, whatever that is often just missing innocence. Deconstructing or deconverting is like another stage of growing up. I'm sure you've had these times in your life and maybe you didn't realize them or they didn't feel as strong, where you can make this comparison. I see it in my own kids as they, in some parts, mourn their younger childhood. They're still young. But like my son, for instance, doesn't believe in Santa or the Tooth Fairy, and did for a time. That's a can of worms for atheists. So if you want to hear about that and me and my wife and how we've chosen to do this, we can definitely talk about that another time. But for the sake of argument, let's leave it aside and just say that I've seen him mourn that anything is possible at any time, that some guy can just come down a chimney, that some fairy brings presents under your pillow. He knows better than that now. That's part of growing up. It's leaving those things behind. But it sucks to leave them behind sometimes. And leaving religion as an adult later in life is like being that kid that believed in Santa till they were 30. Of course, now that you're a part of the real world with real consequences and real responsibility and no scapegoat ready for your sin, which you've also had to let go of that concept of, you miss the innocence. You miss when the world felt ordered, purposeful, and even protect it. There's nothing stupid or naive about that. That's just being human. Religion offers that childlike sense of cosmic security. Oof. I mean, it's really what I think is the number one reason that religion evolved alongside with us, was just to help us manage our existential dread. Deconstruction, deconversion, whatever you want to call it. And I know that this sounds like super self-righteous, like only atheists have the ability to adult. But honestly, leaving behind the idea of a magical, invisible person in the sky that is always watching you, that knit you together in your mother's womb and knows how many hairs are on your head and cares about every little thing you do, think, and feel, and has a perfect plan for you, with a paradise awaiting you if you just do or believe the right thing, that's immature, especially with all of the evidence against it. And so, yeah, again, in a way, deconversion is like fully becoming an adult. And so all of the other...
And so, yeah, on my stance would be just compassionately disagree. It wouldn't be, I completely understand that that a lot of Christians tend to, and when I say tend, I mean it's almost like 90%. They tend to slough off all their responsibilities onto God. My parents certainly were one of them, where the car's transmission is going out and it's a CVT transmission that has a metal belt. You know that those transmissions don't get better, right? And my mom was sitting there praying on the car, trying to fix the transmission with prayer, and I go over there to start the transmission and it's just as bad because they've never stopped driving it. They've never stopped, trying to actually get it repaired, or do any sort of, maintenance or anything like that. But they're standing over the car, praying over it, trying to fix the transmission and just trying to pray away the problem. And I think that's one of the biggest problems with Christianity and any sort of person in general. Look, like he said, human beings, we're all animals. That's kind of the way that I see it. We're all these natural animals that do not want to exert more force than is necessary to get a specific result, right? Whenever stuff comes up, we don't all rush to take fair things. It's like we're greedy beings. We only want to do the very, very bare minimum, but then still get the most extraction, right? So in the case of the transmission that's gone out, well, the bare minimum is saying the prayer for the hope that the transmission's going to fix itself, and now I've got a transmission again. Jesus fixed my transmission, kind of thing. And so that's and I get it, but there's so much of this bypassing that happens where it's like, it is not my job to fix the problems I put myself in. It is God's job to fix the problems that I put myself in, right? And so that's why I always say is like, and I look at all the stuff that I've said, God, I need this, I need that. Never once did I come from a place of, I absolutely have to have this, please make this happen for me. No, it was like, you want me to do this? This is what I require. Until I get that, I'm going to continue doing what I'm going to do, right? And for me, and that's why, the idea of this Western logic, of this idea that, just because there is zero factual evidence for God means that God does not exist. You also have to realize that the reason why there is zero factual evidence that something exists is because people just don't go outside anymore. I was having this conversation with one of my buddies, and he was a hard flat earther, right? Just a hard flat earther. And he was telling me, he was like, yeah, you cannot see the rings on Saturn. And I told him, I was like, yeah, you can. No, you cannot see the rings on Saturn. He was like, I want to see with my own eyes the rings on Saturn. I was like, well, I'm not going to be able to show you with your own eyes, but I could get a telescope. We can adjust the photos. We can throw on the right filters that we need to see. And I can get it to where we can see Saturn. We can see the rings around Saturn. And I was challenging him on that, and I was willing to put my money down to make that happen for him. And his response is, no, it just can't be done. It just can't be done. And I'm just like, bro, it can be done, but you don't want to do it because that would, be another tick, a little chink in your armor. And so, okay, and it's the same thing for a lot of people who are, trying to factually prove that nothing exists. Whenever I started studying plants, I got into a lot of the plant research because the first time I ever connected my house plant to an EMG, whenever I was going through my undergrad and being a super geeky nerd, I started realizing that my plant had perception, because I would connect my plant to an EMG. For those who don't know what that is, it's an electromonogram card. No, something like that. I don't know. But it's essentially a single lead. It's not a 3 lead or 6 lead or 12 lead. It's a single lead, and it's just measuring the electrical activity or the electrical potential that exists inside of whatever, a human being, an animal, a plant, whatever. And I didn't want to practice on animals because although I was getting my degree and more mammalian cell tissues and things like that, I'm not going to run around killing animals in my backyard so that I can have stuff to throw under my microscope. From my view of things, pond water, plants, those were all up for grabs. So anyway, so I had this plant. I put this plant on EMG, and what I noticed is that there was actually a reading consistent electrical rhythm. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And so then I touched the plant, and the electrical activity of the plant jumped all over the place. And I was like, whoa, I had no idea that plants had electrical activity. This is so cool. And so I was thinking, like a scientist would think, okay, well, I touch the plant, I have electrical activity inside of my body, so I need to isolate myself. So then I whack the plant with a glass rod, with a non-conductive glass rod, and the plant still, electrical activity goes crazy. So then I put the plant inside of a box, and I walk out of the room. I put the plant inside of a box, and I walk out of the room, and the whole time I'm recording with my EMG, I walk back into the room, and I notice that there is a small spike in electrical activity as I walk into the room. And so then I'm going all crazy. Oh my God, I figured out something. No, they did all this crap back in the 60s. I'm not finding anything new, right? And so then I started going on this big thing about how plants communicate, how, I almost devoted my life to plants at that point. And the more I researched it, the more I found out that, science just touted it to anomaly. It's just an anomaly. It's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. It's an anomaly. And that was kind of my thing, like this big, massive green glowing orb that shot through, through the farmer's field. It's an anomaly. This, these crazy things that are dancing around in the skies at night while I'm out in the wilderness of Alaska. It's an anomaly, right? It's just like there's so many things that our universe is so teeming with life. It is insane. And so if you're willing to take the stance of the universe is teeming with life, but there still is just no God, I am more accepting of that. To me, I would be more willing to accept that position of, yeah, there are other intelligent beings on other planets of the universe. There are, intelligent things throughout the entirety of the universe. And that doesn't necessarily constitute that a God exists. Okay, I'd be more open to that stance than the stance of nothing exists, and because I have not experienced anything, or because, whatever. And look, I get it. I understand the science between human experience, but at the same time, to take the stance of there is absolutely nothing out there other than what is physical in 3D, it's just not true. And so that's why for me, whenever I deconstructed from Christianity, I could not walk to atheism. I tried, whenever I was in my degree plan, I was atheist, but I was experiencing these things that I would actively have to tell myself were not happening. And I would have to gaslight myself, telling myself that these things were not happening just so that I could stay within my belief system. And I would have to tell people they were crazy just because, and it's kind of the same thing with Christians, right? Your belief system has to stay intact. And so whatever evidence comes up that doesn't match with your belief system, you have to refute it, and you have to completely ignore it, because your belief system revolves around that, right? Your belief system revolves on how you operate on this planet.
Things about leaving childhood behind and becoming an adult, like having to get your first job or having to start paying rent for yourself or shopping for yourself, all of these little things where it's like, oh man, wasn't it easier before? This is like that times 20,000. And again, I don't say any of this to add on. I say it to normalize. Of course you feel this way. And I'm sorry if I'm taking your comment and running in a slightly different direction. Maybe you just wanted advice on how to get community outside of religion. But I'd like to try to address kind of the root issue here, because it's simple enough to just go find new community. I mean, it's hard, especially as an adult. I'm an introvert and a man. It's additionally hard. And I'm in a very Christian community. So I made this channel. You can join a club, a book club, a run club, a bike club, whatever. Go to a local coffee shop on board game night. There's so many things you can do to get plugged in.
Introverted and man and single is the worst. It's like, oh boy, yeah.
With other people, it's going to take time, and it's kind of like making new friends in adulthood. Just in general, that's harder, but it's possible. So I'm focusing less on that community aspect and more on just the, man, sometimes was it better? Was it simpler? Was it easier when I was a Christian, when I was a believer? You're in a transition. There's the easiest way to say it. Transitions are abstract. They are these liminal spaces that are so much more difficult to navigate. And that's okay. You know, a lot of the times, maybe I'll talk on the community part here just a little bit. People can say, okay, well, hey, you know what? If the Christian community is that good, if it's that useful and beneficial, and it's so hard to replicate or rebuild or restart, maybe it's better just to stay. You know what I hear? I hear an ex-drug addict that's finally clean and sober saying, man, being sober kind of sucks. By the way, I'm not accusing you of saying you want to go back or anything. I'm just saying in general, like this ebb and flow of feeling, and even the desire, even if you would never do it, to go back or wish that you could still believe again, these kinds of things. I've reframed my thinking about it, and I really see it as clearly as that person saying, if I could just go back to doing heroin, I was happy back then. But you would never tell your sober friend who is struggling with that transition into full sobriety that it actually was better when they were using, because you know it wasn't, because you know that it was harmful. And you know, even if it takes work, even if it's really, really, really difficult, and even maybe for a really long time, it's still better to be clean, because lots of things provide awesome community, just like lots of things can create happiness. We have this mismatch that happiness or community are.
But this is also a line that I try not to teeter on, is knowing what's best for a person. You know, the truth of the reality is that we all have our own experiences that and cards that we were dealt in this life, right? There is a kid out there that is waking up inside of and the reason why I say that is because I know one. There is a kid out there that is waking up inside of a $7 million house who just exists, and they wake up and they enjoy their day. They do whatever it is that they want to do. And, you know, and that is their life. That's it, right? I know people like that. And so, you know, what is right for them, you know, you wouldn't tell them, hey, you need to grow up and get a job and all this kind of stuff. If they're set for life, they're set for life. They don't need a job, right? And so in their experience of life, the idea of, you know, having to learn how to manage finances, if their grandparents set their trust fund up correctly, maybe they never have to learn how to manage finances. Maybe they were just, you know, born into a wealthy family and they have it, right? And in the same way, if you were born into a poor family, you know, what's right for you may not be, why are you stressing out over finances? Just go buy what you need, right? That may not be the right answer for you either. And so the perception of what is right depends on the person who is perceiving. And that's why from Christianity's right. If you're Catholic, Catholicism's right. If you're Baptist, Baptist is right. If you're Pentecostal, the Pentecostals are right. It's always your perception. And if you're atheist, then atheists are right, right? And so this is where I can get a bit agnostic, where it's like, you know, there are very obvious things that are, you know, not preferred, like murder, right? Murder from Parks and Rec. I don't know if you remember April from Parks and Rec, where he was like, and there's going to be coffees and gore. There's going to be that and murder. But yeah, you know, what is right for one person is not right for another person, right? A diet type that is right for one person may be the death of another person, right? Let's say if this person has a condition that they, can't have too much of a specific kind of chemical like phosphorus. Okay, then a high meat diet or a high red meat diet is probably not going to be for them, right? And so the idea that there is just this constant factual yes and no, this is what's right, it's significantly more complicated like that. Like I said, my belief of God is that if you had to put God onto a book, right? If you had to put God onto a book, then the book would have to be two books. One that was completely empty and completely void, and the other that was so filled with information that it couldn't fit into this universe. Because what I think is that everything is so complex that it can't be understood, yet so simple that it's obvious. That's my belief. What does that mean? I don't know. It's just a belief, but it works for me, and so yeah. But yeah, this is where once again, I tend to part ways because, saying that atheism is what is correct is just as dogmatic as saying that Christianity is what is correct, right? And this is where you have all the agnostics that just say, yeah, maybe something exists, maybe nothing exists. Who knows, And personally, I feel like that's a healthier stance to take because then you're not, gaslighting people out of experiences that they've had in their lives, but at the same time, it's not something that's going to affect you incredibly dogmatically that you're going to go out there and, beat your local sinner because they didn't show up to mass or something.
Are these always good things? Christian community. That's okay. A lot of the times, maybe I'll talk on the community part here just a little bit. People can say, okay, well, hey, you know what? If the Christian community is that good, if it's that useful and beneficial, and it's so hard.
I'm going to stop talking so much so we can get through this. Sorry, guys.
Hard to replicate or rebuild or restart, maybe it's better just to stay. You know what I hear? I hear an ex-drug addict that's finally clean and sober saying, man, being sober kind of sucks. By the way, I'm not accusing you of saying you want to go back or anything. I'm just saying in general, like this ebb and flow of feeling and even the desire, even if you would never do it, to go back or wish that you could still believe again, these kinds of things. I've reframed my thinking about it, and I really see it as clearly as that person saying, if I could just go back to doing heroin, I was happy back then. But you would never tell your sober friend who is struggling with that transition into full sobriety that it actually was better when they were using, because it wasn't, because that it was harmful. And even if it takes work, and even if it's really, really, really difficult, and even maybe for a really long time, it's still better to be clean, because lots of things provide awesome community, just like lots of things can create happiness. We have this mismatch that happiness or community are these always good things. Christian community can make you feel good, but Christian community is fraught with abuse and mental, psychological, spiritual, if you want to say that, harm to the individual. Sometimes we even romanticize. It's all sunshine and rainbows. You remember the best Sunday. You remember the best worship song. Your best friend that was part of your small group that was really the reason you liked going there. You know what else has great community? Cults, gangs, extreme ideological political movements. That doesn't inherently mean they're good. It just means they do community well. You have a responsibility to find healthy community. Maybe that's something that just even knowing that can make the hardship of this just a little bit easier, just a little bit more worth it. Just reminding yourself that this is the right thing. So community does not equal truth. We said that. And community does not equal good. I think it's important to say that. Community is good for us, but being in community for the sake of community doesn't equal, oh, this is healthy. Hopefully I explained that well. So the last thing you said is, how did you get past it? And I don't know if that's the right term. I don't know if I'm fully past it. I don't know if anyone ever gets past these kinds of things or anything at all. We adapt. We find new structures, new habits, new communities, new ways to orient ourselves, new understandings of consciousness or morality or meaning, purpose, etc. I don't know. Maybe past it is better. Maybe what I mean is you might not ever get over it, but you can get through it, past it. Yeah, okay, we're saying the same thing. But if I can be as just truly honest and clear in my own thinking as possible in answering this, I will try to give you a few tips that helped me. Make sure you're not expecting like one new thing to replace everything that you just lost. There's not going to be an individual, a channel, a group, a philosophy that is going to come in and just one-to-one replace everything else. Church, religion, Christianity, community, whatever you want to call it, gave you so much, depending. I mean, I'm talking for myself now. 30 years being raised in it, going to private school, being at church like 14,000 times a week. I got my friends from Christianity, my meaning, my routine, my purpose, my rituals, my emotional support, my moral language. Every single part of my life was grounded in and developed from Christianity. Why could any of that just be replaced because I got into the existentialist philosophers, right? Like that, no, it doesn't work like that. There's tools there. There's some things that helped with certain parts of certain things, but you're not going to just replace this. So I'd encourage you to start thinking instead of like, oh, well, what's next? What replaces Christianity? No. What replaces this one particular thing that I'm focused on right now that is causing distress in my life because of what I lost when leaving this false religion? So for you, maybe,
You know, it reminds me in the Bible where, you know, have you considered my servant Job, right? So Job, you know, in Christianity they see it as God blessed him so much. He lost everything. Job lost everybody that he loved. Yeah. You don't sit with that, right? You're still going to miss that. You're still going to miss parts of you. You know, I used to be a ballroom dancer whenever I was in high school. Parts of me miss being that skinny, that healthy, that, you know, in my prime, being, you know, so attractive that girls were fighting over me. Like, you know, there's parts of me that miss that. But there's another part of me that says going back was, you know, I don't want to go back there, right? Because I was also living in a completely unhealthy way to try to maintain the way that I looked, you know? And I don't want to do that. When I want to have a cookie, I want to eat a fucking cookie, you know? I don't want to be, you know, doing a model starve of myself just so that I can, you know, look good on a dance floor, right? Which that's probably gonna blow all of your minds. But I can still hear some of y'all laughing. No, but no, but you know, if you look at the book of Job, God took everything away from him, fucked around with him just a little bit, and then gave him everything back tenfold or whatever, right? Doesn't matter. Job has to suffer the death of his kids. Job lost his kids. He lost those relationships. Right? Now he has to deal with the trauma of God getting bored. And for the rest of his life, he has to deal with the trauma of maybe God gets bored again. Right? And it's kind of the same thing with walking away with Christianity. I know for me, it came in waves. It was not this one single event of I walked away from Christianity, I started feeling sad, and then I found new people and now I was happy again. No, it was I walked away from Christianity and I found a group of people, and as I continued to grow as a person, I started to not resonate with those people. So then I left and I suffered another loss. And then I found another group of people and I was with them until I grew enough to the point to where they didn't resonate with me. And then I walked away and I found another group of people and I hung out with them until once again I grew to the point to where, you know, and it's not, I don't want you guys to think that growing to the point means that, oh, you're becoming better than them. No, I was looking at the tree trunk that I had pulled out of the ground, and I was ripping away the dirt. I was reclaiming parts of myself that I liked, that I realized, no. I can have this part of meaning. This belongs to me. This root belongs to the tree, right? And so I went through this separating phase of I do love people. I do want to help people. I do want to be there for a homeless person. I do want to go out and give food to these homeless people because I love them so much. I do want to write, you know, empowering messages on the inside of the lids because I want them to feel good about themselves, even though they're probably at the worst point they've ever been. I want to do this for people because that's how much I love this person. And I had to separate from Christianity the idea that, you know, God is, or not God, that Christianity, that loving people, that whole thing came from Christianity. No, it came from the fact that there are good-hearted people out there who do just genuinely love everything, right? And reclaiming those parts from Christianity, separating it out because everybody was saying, oh, no, that's because you're still Christian. Oh, no, 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 no. It has nothing to do with that. I am very much not Christian. You can look at my daily life. I'm supposed to be going to hell, right? I've got a picture up on my wall that says Jesus died for no one. No, I'm just kidding. That's not true. That'd be crazy. But yeah. I mean, I'm not going to talk anymore because we got to keep this moving. I'm making.
You already named it, community.
Way too
and you
long.
have hobby groups, philosophy groups, activism, creative communities, right? Like you have options there for that one particular thing. You might have other particular things you haven't identified, or other people watching might have their one particular thing, or a long list of particular things. But go at it systematically, singularly. One of the things that I was surprised I missed the most was ritual. I've brought that up a few times because that's always on my mind, whether it was communion or the concept of baptism, or like I said earlier, prayer. I had to get new rituals in my life, and man, it's been so exciting. There are so many new things that I've incorporated. So those family traditions, maybe reading or...
That was the one thing for me. I did not miss the rituals. And a matter of fact, I do not enjoy rituals. I enjoy playing. I don't enjoy rituals. Like the whole ritual, like let's all pray. Nah, give me my food. So that was actually whenever I walked away from Christianity, that was one thing I was really happy about, is that I could take all the stupid rituals out of my life and I could just live my life,
or meditation, or lighting incense before you do your yoga and having that quiet half an hour of reflection and introspection. These are things that, whether you knew it or not, you were getting in Christianity that are just gone. They're just gone. It could be meaning. And so you've got to start figuring out your own value.
There are sects of Christianity that would say that doing yoga and meditating will send you to hell. I know that because that's my church. And it's not just them. There's a bunch of other sects of Christianity where lighting an incense candle and doing yoga and meditating, according to my church and a few other churches, would have sent him to hell, because God does not require incense. Why are you lighting incense? What spirit are you, allowing by practicing this yoga that's from another religion, this meditation that's from Buddhism or something like that, right? So quick little drop, just random token.
Values and why you have those values. Maybe some people's particular thing is like transcendence. Go get a star chart and a telescope. Take an art appreciation course. Take a music theory course. Check out my Sharing Fire videos. Teach yourself what Christianity might have stifled for you, like the sciences. That was a long point one here. I'll try to just give you a few more here quickly and close out. My second tip is to let yourself grieve. It's okay. I've made it a point a few times to say, it sucks, because it does. And don't pathologize it. Don't say things like, I shouldn't feel this way, or missing this means that I'm weak, or that I was wrong, or that I can't do this. Tell yourself, of course this hurts. Something very meaningful ended. It's a breakup of sorts. Have you ever been heartbroken by being in love and losing that love and everything that went with it? Didn't mean you can never love again. Didn't mean you should have ran back to that person who wasn't right for you. What it did mean is it took time. You had to heal. You had to learn some new things, and you had to get back out there. It's not the best analogy in the world, but it kind of works. A lot of ex-believers think that they can't give themselves that they can't grieve something that was never true in the first place. Of course you can, because it was true for you for a long time, even if not in reality. True in your mind, true in your heart, true in your lifestyle. You can still honor the role it played in your life without giving extra credence to the religion. Grief does not validate the belief. Damn, that sounds like a slogan. I don't like that, but it's so true. I think a lot of people that leave the faith do not let themselves grieve because they think that it means it meant too much to them, or it must be true. Grieve it. 3, my third tip, get comfortable with I don't know. Embrace it. Start to love uncertainty, because that's your life now. That's life. You weren't in that reality before. You were in a pretend reality that told you it had answers when it didn't. Some things we just don't know. Some things I don't think we can know. I see enough Christian comments every single day to know that that is one of the main reasons people stay in the belief system. They can't come to terms with not having answers. Speaking of Sharing Fire, I did a video recently on explanation addiction, our desire to have an answer even if it's not the right one at any cost. That's religion for you. Check that out for some additional insight and tips. And
I had no idea that he had another channel. I'm going to have to check that one out. Sharing Fire. Interesting. I've never heard that channel before.
Maybe a last tip, and I don't know if this will land correctly or if it will help, but I hope that it does. I had to learn to stop trying to get back to who I was. I kept comparing myself to old Brandon, wondering if I was ever going to get back there. Was I ever going to get the community that I had there? Was I ever going to get the sense of certainty that I had there? That's a different thing. That's a different life. That's a whole different reality. You'll probably never feel that same way again. You can't once you wake up, for lack of a better term. Just like you'll never believe that Santa's going to come at Christmas again. You grew, and there's growing pains. And it's, again, kind of like what I said before, the correct reframing. You don't want to go back to belief. You want to go back to what it felt like when you believed. Not even that, the comfort provided when you believed. But those are different goals. And so I would invite you to really investigate that. By the way, that correct goal of wanting to return to some level of comfort that you used to have is achievable without having to lie to yourself, which is what you would have to do if you went back to the belief. Here's my final reframe for you. Missing your faith, or whatever term you want to put there that's more accurate for you, doesn't mean you made the wrong decision. It means the decision was costly. Oh, did you feel that? Did you just get a little sense of relief or freedom? I know that reframe has helped me tremendously. And so I would encourage you, like I said at the beginning, to be proud of yourself and to just keep going. Find the next thing you need to learn or think about, or group you should join, or skill you should develop, or interest you should learn more about, whatever it is. Do the next thing. Give yourself time and patience. Grieve. Be proud. That's it. Hope that helped. I really do. I'm so sorry I don't have more.
Okay, guys, so that's the video. Yeah, I know whenever I walked away from Christianity, there was churn. There was a lot of churn. What would happen is in the process of reclaiming who I was, outside of the religion, I had made friends accidentally. I had stepped back into situations accidentally. I had all these kind of things where it's like, this is the direction I want to go into, and then I would go a little bit into that direction, then I'd find myself back in almost the same spot, and I'm like, oh, no, I don't want this. And so then I would leave the friend group, or I would leave that person, and then I would go and, find myself, find what I was in the midst of all that rubble of tree roots and dirt. What parts of that are me, right? And so, yeah, it's hard, it's tough, and it's scary, and it is far easier to just remain in complacency. And that's why most people, unless they get hit with some sort of life catastrophic event that turns their life upside down, they never go and they search, because it's more comfortable for them to just sit in the same spot and not actually try to find the truth or try to find what works better for them. I don't claim to be the one who knows all the truth, because I think that the truth is, so simple yet insanely complicated that it can't be understood. So I guess in that way I am a bit agnostic. But I don't claim any tags, simply because I don't feel like I'm also that simple. I don't feel like I'm a person who can claim a tag. I don't feel like it's, I don't put titles on myself just for the simple fact that I am an incredibly complicated individual. Hell, I've got ADHD, All of you immediately know what I meant when I said that. It was like, oh, this guy's incredibly complicated. But yes. Okay, so let me know how you guys feel. That was a bit of a struggle for me to get through, because I've been at mental warfare all day, and then to get through this, I really did enjoy making this video though. And go check out his channel. He's got a really, really great channel, as well as, I think it's Durante Lamar. I think I finally remembered his name. He's also a really good channel. There's another guy too. I love this guy's channel. He's got tattoos all over the place, and he's got really long blonde hair, dirty blonde hair. And he used to be Pentecostal or something like that. But he goes in and he occasionally will do the whole pastor thing, because he used to be a pastor. And so he'll occasionally go into his whole like preaching thing, and I think it's just so much fun. All right, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'm going to take off here, and I've got a bunch of animals to feed, and probably go drink some coffee, even though it's 7 o'clock at night, and then go stare at documents all day. Okay, I love you guys, and we'll see you in the next one. I hope you guys appreciated this video. The videos, don't expect to see another video for probably the next week. I'll post videos as I'm available, but this week, is kind of when the transaction's happening, when we're doing a lot of things are happening this week. And so I may be able to get videos out. I may not be able to get videos out. Don't hold me to it. I'm just giving you guys a heads up. Okay, we'll see you later. Like, subscribe, comment, do that whole thing. See you later.